everyone, this is Sandra at the Whispering Well. So today is a bit of a different video. I thought I would talk about probably my all-time favourite film, which is this one in front of the camera, The Amazing Mr. Blunden. I've loved this film from when I was a kid. I still love it. And I'm going to explain some things about it because it kind of links with me, and you'll see why as we talk about it. So probably a lot of you might have already seen this. Diana Dors plays in this film, and she plays the horrible housekeeper lady, Mrs. Wickens. And if you didn't know that it was Diana Dors playing that part, you'd never know. She does a brilliant acting job of playing this awful old woman. It's so good. I'll just read the back to you. So it says, near destitute after the death of her husband, a widow and her young children are approached by an elderly and mysterious solicitor, Mr. Blunden, who asks the family to become caretakers of a derelict, partly fire-damaged country mansion. The family take up the offer, and shortly after moving into a small cottage on the mansion's estate, the youngsters, Jamie and Lucy, meet up with a pair of ghosts, Sarah and Georgie, two children who were killed in the fire at the mansion 100 years ago. The spirits recount the tale of their wicked housekeeper, Mrs. Wickens, whom they suspect plotted their murder in order to gain their inheritance. Aiming to solve the mystery and hoping to help their new friends along the way, Jamie and Lucy concoct a potion allowing them to travel back in time to the night of the tragedy, where they discover Mr. Blunden's involvement in the dramatic events of that fateful night. So the children, as it says there, their mother is widowed, and the children's father has obviously left some debts, and they end up in Camden Town, and that's where Mr. Blunden first visits them, and he offers their mother the caretaker's job. And he says, we've had a bit of trouble, finding someone for the position. He said it's a remote country house. I thought that it might be a welcome thing for you to be offered the job there, basically. And she is sort of surprised, and then the baby's crying, so she leaves the room, and Jamie and Lucy are left alone with Mr. Blunden. And he says, now I've got you two together, I wonder if I might ask you something. He said, do you think you would be afraid if you were to see a ghost? And Jamie says, well, I might be a little afraid, sir. It depends what type of ghost. And he says, oh, these ghosts would appear to you much as you are. He said, two children of your own age, or an old man such as myself. So anyway, their mother comes back into the room, and he gives her his business card, and they go to the solicitors. The card looks a bit old, and Jamie wonders if the office will actually be there. And when they get there, they speak to one of the other solicitors, a Mr. Clutterbuck, who goes to speak to the elder solicitor there at the office. And he tells the children, well, the children actually see a picture on the wall, and they, oh, this is him, this is Mr. Blunden. And Mr. Clutterbuck says, oh, well, I've caught you out there. That's Mr. Clutterbuck's that's Mr. Blunden's great-grandfather, and he died 100 years ago. And he said, I doubt if our Mr. Blunden came to visit you, because he's not right in his head, kind of thing. But anyway, the guy that the mother has gone to see, he gives her the job, basically. and they have to go to this house, and it's called Langley Park in Buckinghamshire. And this place exists, guys. Alright, some of the scenes were a set, like the house itself is not the same as the house at Langley Park, and I know this because I lived at Langley Park when my dad was in forestry. When he first got the job there, we lived at Langley Park, and we then lived at Black Park after that. But Langley Park, there is an actual mansion house at Langley Park, a huge house which is now actually, I believe, a hotel, but there is a huge mansion house there, and we lived within walking distance of it. Where we actually lived was there was 3 cottages at the gatehouse, and we actually lived in one of those. And in the film you see, because it's set, I think, in sort of Edwardian times, and it's one of those old buses, or old truck type buses that take the children and the mother and Mr. Clutterbuck, the solicitor, to the Langley Park entrance. And I think some people get off the bus before they do at the previous stop, and then Mr. Clutterbuck says to the driver, "Oh, on to Langley Park now," and he's like, "Oh, don't ask me to help with the luggage, Mr. Clutterbuck. Ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties that place has got. Don't ask me to help." And he says, "Proceed, Herbert." And when it stops at Langley Park, that is the actual entrance to where I lived. There's a lodge on the very corner, and we lived in the house next to that one. And yeah, we basically kind of grew up there. I mean, I think I was in the later end of middle school when we moved there, and my youngest brother was only about 3, I think, something like that. So yeah, and you know, we had a whole field opposite that had cows grazing in it. But if you walk through the gate right to the very end of the field, through another gate, and then turned right up a gravel path, that would take you up to the what we called the long avenue that led to Langley Park House. So this film, really, for that reason, but also this film was made in 1972, which is the year I was born. So it's nearly 50 years old, same as me. And a lot of the filming was actually done at Langley Park, in the grounds, in the places where I used to play with my brother, the elder of my 2 brothers, because like I say, the other one was only about 3. And when the children move into the cottage on the grounds of Langley Park House in the film, Lucy goes out by herself with like a basket, I think for probably picking flowers or something, and where she comes out is like a lovely sort of green area, and there's some trees, and that was an area where me and my brother used to play. It's actually called the Arboretum, but it's actually the place where Lucy first sees the 2 ghosts walking across the lawn towards her, Georgie and Sarah, and that's where she first meets them. And so watching this film it's like watching my childhood, because it was where I played. It was one of the places where my dad worked, because he worked at Langley Park and Black Park. But you know, just hearing them even in the film saying, "Oh, Langley Park, Mr. Clutterbuck," and it's like, wow, I actually lived there. Not in the big house itself, obviously, but yeah, I did actually live there, and that whole parkland was like our playground, basically. I mean, I suppose in that way, when you think of childhood, it was like almost perfect. I mean, nobody's childhood is perfect, of course. There's things that happen, there's things you do that you shouldn't, you're in trouble with your parents for different things, and that's just normal with any child. But I loved it. And there was these huge trees as well in Langley Park, near the part where you first see the two children ghosts, where they had these redwood trees, and the bark was kind of soft. When you would touch it, it was soft, and if you shouldn't do this, but you could pull bits of it off because it was like really soft bark. When you sort of tapped it, it didn't knock like normal wood. It was so cool, these huge like redwoods that were there. But yes, in the film, so Lucy at first is afraid when she sees the ghost, and she runs away and gets Jamie, and then they come and talk to the two ghosts, which are Sarah and Georgie, and Sarah explains what has happened to them and how Mrs. Wickens took over at the house because their parents died in a carriage accident, so their legal guardian was then their father's half-brother, and he fell in love with Bella, who is Mrs. Wickens' daughter, who has the mind of a child, basically, and he wants to marry her, so he steals from Langley Park to be able to buy the ring for her, and they get married, and then he has to then admit that he basically hasn't got the money to keep them in the way that perhaps he would like, or the way that perhaps Bella and her mother thought her life was going to be. So Mrs. Wickens moves in with her husband, Mr. Wickens, who used to be a boxer and has got some brain damage because of that, so he doesn't really speak, he just kind of grunts. And she moves in and she proceeds to fire most of the staff apart from one, and takes over the running of the house herself, and the children are just basically locked into their room at night a lot of the time. And when she finds out that there's £30,000 that has been left by the children's father, but left to Georgie, and he's only 10 and he can't have it until he's 21. And so she then thinks, well, if she could, or thinks, how can I get that money sooner? She wants it for Bella, the daughter. And she thinks if the children died in some kind of accident, something like that, make it look like an accident. So she tries to kind of freeze them to death, first of all, by telling the maid to leave the windows open and things like that. But in the end, she asks Mr. Wickens to create a fire, which he does, but it goes too far and burns a portion of the house down, and the children die because she's drugged them. But when we see Sarah and Georgie as ghosts asking for help from Jamie and Lucy, what Sarah does is she gives Lucy a recipe of different herbs that they must make and drink, which will turn the wheel of time, how to kind of turn or change the wheel of time, so that the children, Jamie and Lucy, can go back 100 years with Sarah and Georgie and try to change events so that Sarah and Georgie don't die. Because, and Mr. Blunden's involvement in this is because the children knew that Mrs. Wickens was trying to kill them, and they wrote a letter to Mr. Blunden asking for help, and he didn't give them that help. He sort of just waved it off and told Mrs. Wickens to lock the children up. And then he's obviously riding away from the house on the night of the fire, and he sees the flames and comes running back or riding back on the horse, and sort of shouting, too late, because by then the house is ablaze and, you know, it's too late, he can't save the children. So why he's come to Jamie and Lucy is to get their help, so that he can basically rest in peace knowing that the children didn't actually die. And at the end of the film, he helps Jamie to go through the flames up the stairs and save the children. And the children's graves were in the churchyard. Lucy and Jamie had found them, but after this has taken place and the children have gone back in time and basically moved the wheel of time, there's a big like memorial type gravestone in the churchyard for Mr. Blunden, saying, what does it say? He the shepherd giveth his life to save the sheep. So and to save the children in his charge. So Jamie and Lucy do actually succeed in doing this. And the end of the story is really cool, because when they've done this, Jamie takes a while to come back, and he has a doctor out, and it's like he's in a coma, but he does actually come round. And then Mr. Clutterbuck comes back, the solicitor, and says that there Mr. Blunden raised himself from his sick bed and said, get those papers on the marriage of Miss Sarah and Master Tom. Now Tom was the gardener's son, who you could see was obviously in love with Sarah. And it had turned out that Sarah and Tom had actually married, although, as Mr. Clutterbuck says, oh, you know, it wasn't basically the done thing because he'd married out of his class, because obviously then there was a class system, and Sarah was upper class, and, you know, Tom was working class. But they'd made a life in America, and it turned out that Sarah was the children's great-great-great-great-grandmother on their father's side. So that it turns out they were actually related to these people that they'd actually saved. So and they'd got some money that meant they could live at the house for their lifetime. So it's a really cool film. And what I'd also managed to do, because at Christmas they remade this film. I'm too scared. I've recorded it, but I'm too scared to watch it, because I just know it's probably going to disappoint me, because I love the original, but I still may watch it, I'll see. But anyway, they showed the remake over Christmas time of The Amazing Mr. Blunden, and reissued the book with a different cover. So the book is by Antonia Barber, so I had to get it. I've never actually read the book, and of course it is a children's storybook, like modern classics. You know, but saying that, you know, anyone could read this, and it's also short, so it's not going to take you too long to read it. And I just think it's just a brilliant story and a brilliant film, and I just thought I would tell you about it and about my kind of links with it, because we actually lived at Langley Park, where the film is based and where a lot of it was actually filmed. So yeah, so anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to me rambling on about Mr. Blunden. But I just love this film, and if any of you haven't seen it and you ever get a chance, please do watch it. It's so good, I think, anyway. You know, like I say, it was made in 1972, so it may be a bit dated, but I just love it. Like I said, I don't know what the remake is like, and you know, even if it's good, this will always be my favourite because of, you know, where it was made, and it's the one I've always known. So yeah, anyway, I hope everyone is doing well, and I'll be back soon, probably with a walkthrough video. So I'll see you all then. Bye.